Please, don't eat that food. The scream tore through the crystal chandeliers and marble floors of the Grandeur Hotel like a siren in a sanctuary. Every head turned. Every conversation stopped. Every fork froze midair. A child, no more than 9 years old, barefoot, clothes hanging in tatters, was sprinting through the five-star restaurant's main dining hall. Past the velvet ropes. Past the stunned hostess. Past 2 security guards who lunged too late to catch those impossibly quick, desperate feet. Please, don't eat that food. The child's voice cracked with such raw panic that for just one heartbeat, the entire room held its breath. Then came the laughter. Scattered at first, then building like a wave. Phones appeared in hands like magic tricks. The recording had already begun. At table 17, the best table, naturally, with a view of the entire room, sat Marcus Whitmore. Billionaire. Philanthropist, according to the plaques on his office wall. Tech mogul who'd made his fortune in security systems and now spent his evenings being photographed at charity galas while wearing watches worth more than most people's homes. He'd just lifted a fork to his mouth. Grilled salmon, truffle reduction, gold leaf garnish. The kind of dish that cost more than this child had probably seen in months. The child skidded to a stop at his table, chest heaving, eyes wild with something that wasn't hunger. It was terror. Pure un dilute de terror. Please, the child gasped, reaching out, not for the food but toward it as if to knock it away. Please don't eat that. You can't. You can't. Marcus Whitmore didn't lower his fork. He raised one perfectly groomed eyebrow instead. The expression of a man accustomed to being interrupted by nothing and no one. Security, he said, his voice carrying that particular tone of boredom that only the truly wealthy can master. I believe we have a situation. More laughter rippled through the room. A woman in diamonds whispered loudly enough to be heard, probably trying to get money. They use children now, you know. It's a scam. Look at those clothes, someone else murmured. Absolutely disgraceful they let someone like that in here. The child was shaking now, but not backing away. Those small hands were still extended, still trying to protect the stranger from something no one else could see. Sir, please, I'm not asking for anything. I'm trying to help you. There's something wrong with my dinner? Marcus's smile was thin and sharp. Let me guess. You're going to tell me it's poisoned? That I'm in danger? And conveniently, you know exactly how to save me, for a small fee. He looked around the room, playing to his audience now. I've heard this one before. Different city, same script. The phones were recording everything. The child's desperate face. The torn shirt that might have once been blue. The bare feet leaving small, dirty prints on marble that probably cost $1,000 per square foot to install. I'll give the little entrepreneur credit for creativity, Marcus continued, warming to his performance now. Rushing in here like the building's on fire. That's commitment to the con. He turned to the security guards who had finally caught up, breathless and red-faced. Gentlemen, I think our young friend here needs an escort back to whatever bridge they crawled out from under. The laughter was louder now. Cruel and braying. The kind of laughter that happens when people feel superior, when they're united in their certainty that they're watching something pathetic unfold before them. But the child didn't run. Didn't beg. Those eyes, dark and bright with unshed tears, stayed locked on Marcus Whitmore's face. You don't understand, the child whispered. My parent told me. Before they died. They told me what to look for. They made me promise. And that food, those small hands were trembling now. That food has the signature. I can see it. The color's wrong. The smell. The way the garnish is placed. It's all wrong. For just a moment, barely a flicker, something crossed Marcus Whitmore's face. Confusion, perhaps, or the faintest spark of unease. But then his mask of superiority slid back into place. The signature, he repeated slowly, mockingly. Of what exactly? Are you suggesting this fine establishment is serving me? What? Poisoned salmon? He looked at the maitre d', who had appeared wringing his hands. I think we might have grounds for a lawsuit here. Defamation. What do you think? Sir, I am so sorry, we have no idea how this child got past. It's not the restaurant's fault. The child's voice cracked again, desperation turning to something like anguish. They don't know. They can't see it. But it's there. It's there. And if you eat it, you'll... Enough. Marcus's voice went cold. Glacial. The voice of a man who'd crushed smaller companies than some nations' GDPs. I don't know what game you're playing or who sent you, but this performance is over. Security, remove this child. And someone call social services. This is clearly neglect. No responsible guardian would allow their child to run around the city pulling stunts like this. The security guards moved in, their hands on the child's shoulders now. Not rough, exactly, but firm. Unmovable. The kind of grip that says the decision has been made and resistance is futile. Please, the child whispered one last time, eyes still on that fork, that salmon, that gleaming piece of food that looked so perfect and harmless to everyone else in the room. Please don't eat it. My parent died protecting people from things like this. They made me promise to use what they taught me. Please. I'm not lying. I'm not trying to trick you. I'm trying to save your life. Marcus Whitmore smiled. Cold. Victorious. The smile of a man who'd won before the game even started. Watch, he said, loud enough for every phone camera to record. Watch me eat my dinner, which is perfectly fine, and which this little con artist wants me to throw away so they can, what? Pick it out of the trash later? Sell me some miracle cure? I've seen every version of this scam. He lifted the fork to his mouth. The child's knees buckled, but the security guards held them upright. And Marcus Whitmore took a bite. The room exploded in applause. Actual applause. As if he'd done something brave instead of something cruel. As if humiliating a terrified child was entertainment worth celebrating. Delicious, Marcus announced, chewing slowly, deliberately. Absolutely perfect. Just like I expected. He made a show of taking another bite. See? No poison. No danger. Just a very disturbed child who needs serious help. But the child wasn't watching him anymore. Those eyes had gone distant, unfocused, as if seeing something far away. Or perhaps something that hadn't happened yet but soon would. 30 minutes, the child whispered. Maybe 40. The symptoms start small. You won't even notice at first. Get them out of here, Marcus said, waving his hand dismissively. And ban them from the property. I don't want to see this face again. The security guards began walking the child toward the exit. The phones were still recording. The laughter was dying down now, replaced by a buzz of gossip and speculation. Stories were already being composed. Tweets drafted. The crazy homeless kid who accused a billionaire of eating poisoned food. The bizarre disruption at the grandeur. The feel-good story of the day where the rich man showed patience and the troublemaker got what they deserved. No one noticed that the child wasn't struggling anymore. Wasn't crying. Just walking with a kind of terrible resignation in those small shoulders. The walk of someone who'd tried their best and failed, and now could only wait for the inevitable. At the door, the child looked back one more time. Marcus Whitmore had returned to his dinner, to his companions, to his world where children in tatters didn't exist except as minor inconveniences to be removed by staff. I'm sorry I couldn't stop you, the child said, too quiet for anyone but the security guards to hear. My parent would have known what to say. Would have made you listen. I tried. I really tried. And then the child was gone, escorted out into the night, into the city that had no place for truth spoken by the wrong kind of voice. Back at table 17, Marcus Whitmore finished his meal. Until the system showed something no one expected. If you want to see what happens next, hit that subscribe button. This story is just beginning, and what's coming will change everything you think you know about judgment, justice, and the price of not listening. Question for you. Why do you think the child was so desperate to stop him? Drop your thoughts in the comments. But to understand what happened next, you need to understand what came before. You need to know about the person who taught that child to see what others couldn't. You need to know about Dr. Sarah Chin, and why her death was both an ending and a beginning. Sarah Chin had been brilliant. The kind of brilliant that doesn't come from privilege or opportunity, but from raw, relentless determination. She'd grown up in a neighborhood where gunshots were more common than birdsong, where the closest thing to healthcare was the free clinic that opened 2 afternoons a week and always ran out of supplies by noon. She'd watched people die from preventable causes, from infections that antibiotics could have stopped, from diseases that early detection could have caught, from the kind of grinding, systematic neglect that happens when society decides some lives matter less than others. So she'd made herself matter more. Scholarships, student loans that would take decades to repay, nights spent studying by streetlight because the electricity was shut off again. She'd clawed her way into medical school, then into a specialization in toxicology and public health. She'd become an expert in environmental poisons, in contamination, in the invisible killers that lurked in water systems and food supplies and the air itself. She'd made it her life's work to protect people, especially people like the ones she'd grown up with, the ones no one else protected. And she'd had 2 children, twins, a boy and a girl who she'd raised alone after their father decided that fatherhood was too expensive, too complicated, too much of an inconvenience for his plans. She'd named them Alex and Jordan, and she'd taught them everything she knew. Not because she wanted them to follow in her footsteps, though she wouldn't have minded, but because she wanted them to see clearly, to understand that the world wasn't always what it appeared to be. That safety was often an illusion. That knowledge was protection, and ignorance was danger dressed in comfortable clothes. "Look closer," she'd tell them, holding up a glass of water. "What do you see?" "Water," they'd say. "Look closer." And she'd teach them about particulates and chemicals, about pH levels and contamination markers, about the difference between clear and clean, about the things you couldn't see that could still hurt you. She taught them about food, about the signs of tampering, of spoilage that went beyond simple age, about the specific markers of certain toxins, about how to recognize when something was wrong even when every official system said it was fine. "Trust your knowledge," she'd say. "Trust what you can verify. But also trust your instincts when they scream that something's wrong." The people who ignore that inner alarm? They're the ones who end up in emergency rooms wondering how they missed the signs. She taught them how to recognize the signatures of specific contaminations, the particular discoloration of certain preservatives, the smell of chemicals that shouldn't be in organic compounds, the way garnishes were sometimes used to hide irregularities in prepared foods. Her children learned. They were sharp, both of them. Alex was the cautious one, methodical, who'd triple-check before speaking. Jordan was bold, impulsive, the one who'd sound an alarm even if it meant looking foolish. Both of them brilliant in their own ways. Both of them carrying their mother's legacy in their bones. And then Sarah Chin got sick. Not from her work, ironically. Just cancer. The kind that appeared without warning and spread with cruel efficiency. The kind that even her medical knowledge couldn't stop, though she tried. God, how she tried. She fought for 3 years. 3 years of treatments that cost more than she'd ever imagined. 3 years of her savings evaporating, then her retirement, then everything she'd built. 3 years of working between chemotherapy sessions because medical debt doesn't care about sickness. She'd set up a trust fund for her children. Nothing elaborate. She wasn't wealthy, just careful. Enough to see them through college, maybe. Enough to give them a chance. She'd designated her sister Linda as guardian, someone she trusted to do right by her kids. She'd written letters. Multiple copies, stored in different places. Letters that explained everything. Her work, her plans, the trust fund details. Instructions for Linda. Moral guidance for her children. In the letter to Alex and Jordan, she'd written, "The most dangerous lies are the ones that come wrapped in authority and confidence. Always verify. Always question. And when you know something is wrong, speak up, even if no one wants to hear it. Especially then." She'd made them promise. Made them swear, in her hospital room during one of her last clear days, that they'd look out for each other. That they'd use what she taught them. That they'd never let convenience or fear stop them from telling the truth. "Promise me," she'd whispered, her voice already fading. "Promise me you'll speak up when it matters, even when it's hard, even when no one believes you." "We promise," they'd said together, holding her hands. She died on a Tuesday. The funeral was on Friday. By Monday, everything had started to fall apart. Linda arrived at the funeral with her new husband, Greg. They seemed sympathetic enough at first. Sad eyes. Appropriate condolences. Promises to take good care of the twins. The children moved into Linda's house. A nice house, actually, in a decent neighborhood. Clean rooms. Good school district. Everything a court would look at and approve. What the court didn't see was how quickly sympathy turned to resentment. Linda had never wanted children. She'd agreed to be guardian because it was the right thing to do, the familial obligation. But she'd never considered that it would actually happen. That her sister would actually die and leave her with 2 kids who weren't hers, who disrupted her life, who came with complicated legal arrangements and trust funds she couldn't access for their benefit. Trust funds she could see but not touch. Money that had her name on it as trustee but came with strict rules about usage. Money for education, healthcare, necessities. Nothing for Linda's mortgage. Nothing for Linda's debts. Nothing for the lifestyle Linda felt she deserved for taking on this burden. Greg was worse. He saw the children as competition, as obstacles to the life he'd imagined with Linda, as 2 extra mouths that ate their food, used their utilities, took up space in what was supposed to be his house. Within 6 months, the restrictions started. Small things at first. You don't need new shoes, those still fit. Dinner is whatever's left over. Your mother's things? We donated those. No point keeping clutter. Within a year, the children had gone from grieving orphans to something closer to servants. Cleaning the house. Cooking meals. Staying out of sight when Linda and Greg had guests. The trust fund remained untouched. Every dollar accounted for and reported to the court-appointed overseer who reviewed the finances once a year and saw nothing wrong. The children had a roof over their heads. They went to school. They weren't being beaten. By legal standards, they were fine. By human standards, they were drowning. Alex tried to cope by becoming invisible. By doing everything right, being perfectly behaved, hoping that good behavior would earn them some measure of peace. Jordan tried to cope by remembering their mother's words. By holding on to the knowledge she'd given them. By looking at the world the way she'd taught them to look, with clear eyes that saw past surfaces to the truth underneath. It was Jordan who first suggested they run away. Jordan who whispered plans in the dark of their shared room. Jordan who said they could make it on their own, that anything was better than this slow suffocation. Alex wanted to wait. Wanted to believe things might get better. Wanted to trust that the system that was supposed to protect them would eventually notice they needed protecting. Then came the day Linda found out about the provision in the trust. The provision that said if the children were no longer in her care, if they were removed, or ran away, or aged out, the remaining funds would go to a charity of Sarah Chen's choosing. Not to Linda. Not for administrative costs, or guardian compensation. Just gone from her reach entirely. That was when everything changed. That was when Linda stopped pretending. Stopped maintaining even the appearance of care. Because if she couldn't have the money, then why should she waste effort on these ungrateful children who her sister had dumped on her? You want to leave? She'd said when she'd caught Jordan looking at bus schedules. Then leave. See how far you get. 2 kids with nothing. No one wants you. No one ever wanted you. Even your mother only kept you around out of obligation. You think the world is going to be kinder than I've been? Go ahead. Try. That night, after Linda had gone to bed, Jordan had packed a bag. Just a few clothes. The copy of their mother's letter that they'd hidden from Linda. The photo of Sarah Chen that was all they had left. We have to go, Jordan had whispered to Alex. It's only going to get worse. Alex was 12 years old and terrified. But Alex looked at Jordan, bold, brave Jordan who was shaking but determined, and nodded. They left through the window. 2 children who became homeless not because they had no home, but because the home they had was worse than the streets. They survived. Barely. The city has hiding places if you're small enough. Shelters that ask too many questions they learned to avoid. Churches that give out meals. Libraries where you can stay warm and read and pretend you're just studying. They kept each other safe. Alex and Jordan. Jordan and Alex. 2 halves of the same whole, protecting each other the way their mother had taught them to protect themselves. And they used what she taught them. Jordan especially. Sharp-eyed Jordan, who could spot contamination in food, who could tell when water was unsafe, who could see the things other people missed. Jordan, who, 3 months after they ran away, happened to be in a shelter kitchen when the food shipment came in. Who saw the particular discoloration in the produce. Who recognized the signature of a specific pesticide contamination. Who tried to warn the shelter staff. "This food isn't safe," Jordan had said, just 9 years old and trying to sound authoritative. They'd laughed. Patted Jordan's head. "It's fine, sweetie. Perfectly good food. Donated by a generous supplier." Jordan had tried to explain. Tried to use the technical terms their mother had taught them. But no one listens to a homeless child playing scientist. No one wants to hear that the donated food might be dangerous. That generosity might come with invisible costs. The shelter served the food. 12 people got sick. 2 ended up hospitalized. An investigation was launched. The supplier was found to have cut corners, used contaminated produce, falsified safety reports. But by then, Jordan and Alex were gone. Running from authorities who wanted to ask questions, put them in the system, separate them. Running from Linda, who'd heard they'd been spotted and wanted them back. Not for love, but because losing her guardianship would mean losing access to any future claims on that trust fund. They learned to stay hidden, to survive, to use their mother's knowledge in small ways that helped other street kids stay safe. Jordan became known among the homeless community as the kid who could tell if food was safe, if water was clean, if a place was dangerous. Alex became the planner, the one who found safe places to sleep, who managed their limited resources, who kept them one step ahead of the authorities and Linda's searching. And then came the day Jordan saw the news story about Marcus Whitmore, tech billionaire dining at the Grandeur Hotel. Philanthropist, the headline said. Champion of children's causes, it claimed. Someone who just donated millions to youth education programs. Someone who, according to the brief video clip, was being served a meal in the restaurant's main hall. A meal Jordan could see clearly in the background of the shot. A meal with that particular garnish arrangement. That specific discoloration in the sauce. That telltale signature. The signature of a contamination their mother had spent years tracking. A sophisticated form of poisoning that was rare but devastating. Something that happened when criminal organizations wanted to send a message or remove an obstacle. Something that looked completely natural until it was too late. Jordan had seen this before. In their mother's files. In the cases she'd worked on. In the photographs she'd used to teach them what to look for. "That man is going to die," Jordan had whispered to Alex. "You can't know that from a news clip." "I can. Mom taught us." "Look," Jordan had pointed to the screen, explaining the markers, the signs, the unmistakable pattern. Alex had looked. Had seen. Had felt that terrible sinking certainty. "What do?" "We warn him," Jordan had said simply. "He won't listen. No one listens to us." "Then we try anyway." "That's what Mom said. We try anyway." So Jordan had gone to the Grandeur Hotel. Had slipped past security who were too busy checking well-dressed guests to notice one more street kid in the crowd. Had seen Marcus Whitmore at his table, fork lifting to his mouth. And Jordan had done what their mother had made them promise to do. Spoken the truth. Even when no one wanted to hear it. Even when it made them look crazy. Even when it cost them everything. "Please, don't eat that food." The scream that would change everything. The warning that no one believed. The truth that was about to prove itself in the most terrifying way possible. Subscribe to see what happens when the 30 minutes are up and the truth can no longer be ignored. Because justice is coming, and it won't be gentle. Question for you. Who do you think failed these children the most? The aunt who was supposed to protect them, the system that didn't notice their suffering, or the society that looks away from children in need? Let me know below. 33 minutes after Marcus Whitmore took that first bite, he was still eating. Still smiling. Still entertaining his dinner companions with stories about his latest acquisition, some startup that would revolutionize something or other. His voice was strong. His hands were steady. He was the picture of health and confidence. At 35 minutes, he paused to take a sip of water. At 37 minutes, he wiped his mouth with his napkin and someone at the table noticed his hand was shaking slightly. Just a tremor. Nothing significant. Too much caffeine today, Marcus joked. At 40 minutes, he was reaching for his wine glass when his vision doubled. Just for a second. Just long enough to make him blink hard and set the glass down more carefully than he'd intended. "You all right?" his companion asked. "Fine. Just tired. Long day." At 42 minutes, the first wave of nausea hit. Marcus Whitmore, who never showed weakness, who'd built an empire on the perception of invulnerability, went pale. The kind of pale that makes people nearby instinctively lean away. "I think," he started, then stopped. Swallowed hard. "I think I need some air." He stood up. The room tilted. Not dramatically. Not enough to fall. Just enough to make him grip the table edge. Just enough to make every person at nearby tables suddenly very interested in what was happening at table 17. "Sir?" The maitre d' appeared instantly, professionally concerned. "Is something wrong?" "I'm fine," Marcus said, but his voice was thinner now. Uncertain. "Just need to." The second wave was stronger. His stomach cramped with a violence that made him gasp. His skin had gone from pale to gray. Sweat was beading on his forehead despite the restaurant's perfect climate control. "Call an ambulance," someone said. "No, Marcus tried to object, but another cramp cut him off. He bent slightly, breathing hard. This was when phones came out again. Not to record mockery this time. To record something else. Something that was starting to look very, very serious. At 45 minutes, Marcus Whitmore collapsed. Not gracefully. Not quietly. He went down hard, knocking over his chair, scattering crystal glasses that shattered against marble. His body convulsed once, twice. His eyes rolled back. The restaurant erupted in chaos. People screaming for help. Others calling 911. The maitre d' was on his phone with emergency services, his professional composure finally cracking. Staff members rushed over with napkins, with water, with panic poorly disguised as efficiency. And somewhere in the crowd forming around the fallen billionaire, someone said it. Just loud enough to be heard. That kid. The one who said not to eat the food. Everyone froze. Everyone remembered. The barefoot child. The desperate scream. The warning no one had believed. "Get that security footage," someone else said. "Get it now." At 48 minutes, the paramedics arrived. By then, Marcus Whitmore was unconscious. His breathing shallow and labored. His pulse rapid and thready. The paramedics worked quickly. 4 lines, oxygen, vitals being called out in that particular urgent calm that emergency responders use when things are very bad. "What did he eat?" one of them demanded. The maitre d' gestured to table 17. To the remains of the meal. To the garnished salmon that had looked so perfect and tasted so good. This. Just this. Nothing unusual. We serve this dish 100 times a week with no issues. "Bag it," the paramedic said grimly. "All of it. And someone needs to call poison control." The word hung in the air like smoke after gunfire. Poison. The thing the child had tried to warn them about. The thing they'd all laughed at. The thing that was now very, very real. "There was a kid," a woman said, her voice shaking. "A homeless kid. They ran in here screaming about the food. They tried to stop him from eating. Her voice broke. We laughed. We all laughed." The paramedics loaded Marcus Whitmore onto a stretcher. His face was a color no living face should be. His body was still convulsing periodically, muscles spasming beyond his control. As they wheeled him toward the exit, the restaurant's general manager appeared, white-faced and shaking. He was holding a tablet. The security footage. "You need to see this," he said to no one and everyone. On the screen, playing on loop, a child bursting through the entrance. Security guards lunging and missing. That small figure running toward table 17 with such desperate purpose. And then the scream. Clear and terrible and true. "Please, don't eat that food." The audio was crystal clear. The panic unmistakable. The sincerity devastating. The footage showed what happened next. Marcus lifting the fork. The child's knees buckling. The cruel applause. The mocking laughter. The child being dragged away while everyone celebrated the billionaire's bravery. Someone in the crowd started crying. The footage continued. Showed Marcus finishing his meal. Showed him laughing. Showed him confident and cruel and utterly certain that he was right and the child was wrong. The timestamp showed 33 minutes from the first bite to the first symptom. 37 minutes to visible distress. 45 to collapse. Just like the child had predicted. Find that kid, someone said urgently. Someone find that kid right now. But Jordan was long gone. Back to the underpass where Alex was waiting, where they'd hidden and survived for months. Back to the shadows where children like them learned to disappear. You tried, Alex had said when Jordan returned, shaking and devastated. You did everything you could. It wasn't enough. He didn't listen. No one listens. They'd held each other in the dark, two children trying to hold back a world that didn't want them. Trying to believe their mother's promise that truth mattered, that speaking up mattered, even when it seemed like nothing changed. They didn't know that at that moment, in that restaurant, everything was changing. The Grandeur Hotel had gone on lockdown. Police were securing the scene. The health department was en route. The food was being tested. The suppliers were being contacted. The kitchen staff was being questioned. And the footage was spreading. Already shared to a dozen phones. Already posted online. Already going viral in that particular way that happens when something is too dramatic, too ironic, too perfectly tragic to ignore. Homeless child tries to save billionaire's life. Gets laughed at and removed by security. Billionaire collapses exactly when the child predicted. Now in critical condition. The headlines were writing themselves. The story was exploding across social media. 10,000 views. 100,000. 1,000,000. People sharing, commenting, outraged. Where was the child? Who were they? How did they know? Why didn't anyone listen? At the hospital, doctors were working frantically. The toxicology reports came back preliminary but damning. Contamination. Sophisticated. Deliberate. The kind of thing that required knowledge and intent. The kind of thing that was very, very illegal. Marcus Whitmore was alive, but barely. Intubated. Sedated. Fighting for every breath while machines and medications did the work his body couldn't manage. If the paramedics had arrived 5 minutes later, he would have been dead. If the child hadn't warned him, if he'd eaten more of the contaminated food, he would have been dead. If anyone had listened, if anyone had taken a homeless child's desperate warning seriously, he never would have eaten any of it at all. The irony was lost on no one. In the morning, every news station in the city was running the story. The footage played on repeat. The analysis began. Who was this child? How did they know? Where did they learn to recognize poisoning before it happened? The police wanted to find the child too. Not to arrest them, to thank them. To get information. To understand how a 9-year-old homeless kid had seen what trained restaurant staff, health inspectors, and a billionaire's personal security team had all missed. But Jordan and Alex had learned a long time ago that when adults started looking for you, nothing good followed. They stayed hidden, stayed safe, stayed together, until the moment when hiding became impossible. Because there was one person watching the news coverage with a very different reaction than everyone else. Linda watched the footage and saw her sister's children. Recognized Jordan's face even beneath the grime and fear. Recognized the knowledge that Sarah Chen had passed down. The knowledge Linda had dismissed as obsessive and paranoid and useless. Knowledge that had just saved a billionaire's life. Knowledge that was now worth something. Hit subscribe because what comes next will restore your faith that justice exists, even in a world that's forgotten how to listen to the most vulnerable voices. Question: did this revelation surprise you? Did you think the child would be proven right? Drop your answer below. Detective Sarah Martinez had been working missing children cases for 15 years. She'd seen it all. The custody disputes. The runaways. The parental abductions. The heartbreaking reality of kids who fell through every crack society had to offer. But she'd never seen anything quite like this. The viral video had landed on her desk within hours. A child who fit the description of Jordan Chen, one of two twins who'd been reported missing from their legal guardian's care 7 months ago. A case that had gone cold because homeless children were very good at staying hidden, and because honestly, the resources for finding runaways were limited when there were fresh abductions to work. But now the entire city was looking for this kid. The mayor was asking questions. The media was camped outside police headquarters. And Marcus Whitmore, who was conscious now and recovering, had made a very specific request. "Find them," he'd said from his hospital bed, his voice still weak but determined. "Find that child who saved my life. I need to thank them. I need to understand." Detective Martinez studied the footage for the 100th time. Watched the desperation in Jordan's face. The absolute certainty. The way the child had tried to physically stop someone from eating, not to steal food but to prevent harm. This wasn't a disturbed kid pulling a stunt. This was a trained kid trying to help. The question was, trained by whom? She pulled the file on Sarah Chin. Read about the toxicologist who died 3 years ago. The single mother who'd been an expert in environmental poisons and contamination. Who'd taught courses on identification and prevention. Who'd published papers on recognition of sophisticated poisoning methods. Who'd had twin children named Alex and Jordan. The pieces clicked together with an almost audible snap. They were trained by their mother, Martinez said aloud to her partner. They know this stuff. It's not luck. It's education. But why are they homeless? They had a legal guardian. Martinez pulled up Linda's file. The guardian report that had been filed when the children went missing. Linda's statement that they'd run away, that she'd done everything she could, that they were troubled kids who refused help. Something about it felt wrong. Too clean. Too practiced. Martinez decided to pay Linda a visit. Linda answered the door in expensive athleisure wear, her hair professionally colored, her nails recently done. The house behind her was immaculate. New furniture. Recent renovations. The look of someone who was doing quite well financially. "Detective Martinez, I'm following up on the case of your niece and nephew." Linda's face arranged itself into concern. Perfect, practiced concern. "Have you found them? I've been so worried." "I'm sure. Can I come in?" They sat in a living room that felt staged. Too perfect. Like a showroom rather than a home. "When did you last see the twins?" 7 months ago. I woke up and they were gone. Just vanished. I reported it immediately. "And how were things before they left? Any problems? Arguments?" "They were troubled children, detective. Their mother died and they never really processed it. I tried to give them a stable home, but they were difficult. Angry. They resented me for not being her." Martinez nodded, making notes. "And the trust fund their mother established, you're still the trustee?" Something flickered in Linda's eyes. "Just for a moment. Just. Not that it matters. I can't access it without proof I'm caring for them. Which I can't do because they ran away. Must be frustrating." "It's not about the money, detective. I'm worried about their safety." Martinez smiled thinly. "Of course. I'm sure you've heard about the incident at the Grandeur Hotel?" Linda's face went carefully blank. "I saw it on the news." "The child in that video, did they look familiar to you?" "It's hard to tell from the footage. Because we ran facial recognition. It's Jordan. No doubt about it. Your niece or nephew, the file lists them both, who you reported missing. Turns out they're not just missing. They're using skills they learned from their mother. Skills in toxicology and contamination identification. Skills that just saved a man's life." Linda said nothing. "Here's what I find interesting," Martinez continued. "A child with that level of expertise. A child who clearly still has their mental faculties intact and their moral compass functioning. That child didn't run away from a good home. That child ran away from something worse than the streets. So I have to ask myself, what was so bad here that living under a bridge seemed preferable?" "You're out of line, detective." "Am I?" "Because I'm going to be looking very closely at how you managed the trust fund. At whether any of those necessary expenses were actually necessary. At what life was really like for those kids. And if I find out they were neglected, abused, or forced out. I want you to leave." Martinez stood. I will. But those kids are about to become the most famous children in this city. Everyone's going to want to know their story, including a judge who can review guardianship arrangements. If I were you, I'd start preparing a very good explanation for why they chose homelessness over you. She left Linda sitting in her perfect living room, wearing her expensive clothes, surrounded by renovations that trust fund money probably shouldn't have paid for. Martinez had seen enough. This case wasn't about finding missing kids anymore. It was about protecting them from ever having to go back. Finding Jordan and Alex took 3 more days. Days of canvassing homeless communities, earning trust, explaining that this wasn't about punishment or separation, that there were people who wanted to help. It was an older homeless man who finally brokered the meeting, who convinced the twins that this detective was different, that maybe, just maybe, the world had finally decided to listen. They met in a library, neutral territory, public enough to feel safe. Martinez's first thought when she saw them was how small they were. How young. Children playing adult roles because adults had failed them. Her second thought was how watchful their eyes were. How they sat close together, hands almost touching, ready to run. "I'm not here to take you back to Linda," Martinez said immediately. "I'm here to listen. And I have something for you." She pulled out an envelope. Inside was the letter their mother had written. The one that had been filed with the court as part of the guardianship arrangement. The one Linda was supposed to have given them but never did. "This is from your mother. It's been in the court records. I think she would want you to have it." Jordan took it with shaking hands. Alex leaned close, reading over their shoulder. The letter was long, full of love and instruction and wisdom. It explained the trust fund. It reminded them of their worth. It told them to stay together. It made them promise to use their knowledge to help others, to speak truth even when it was hard, to never let the world make them small. It ended with a line that made both children start crying. "You are not a burden. You are not unwanted. You are brilliant and brave and good. And anyone who makes you feel otherwise is lying. Trust yourself. Trust each other. And remember, the most dangerous lies are the ones that come wrapped in authority and confidence. Always verify. Always question. And when you know something is wrong, speak up even if no one wants to hear it." They read it twice. Then again. Memorizing every word their mother had written to them, words they should have received years ago. Finally, Jordan looked up at Martinez with red-rimmed eyes. "What happens now?" "Now," Martinez said gently, "we make sure you're safe. Really safe. We find you a place where you're not just tolerated but wanted. Where you can use your minds and your skills and your hearts. Where you can be children again. We can't go back to Linda. You won't. I promise you that. And we stay together? You stay together." For the first time since their mother died, the twins let themselves hope. Subscribe to see justice finally catch up with those who failed these children, and to watch what happens when the powerful are held accountable by the powerless. Question for you: what should real justice look like now? Is it enough that the children are safe, or should there be consequences for Linda? Tell me what you think. The public reckoning came swiftly and completely. Within a week, investigative journalists had torn apart Linda's finances. The trust fund had been meticulously managed on paper, but her own expenses had exploded the moment she'd become guardian. The new car, the home renovations, the luxury purchases, all legally her own money, but the timing was suspicious. The pattern clear. More damaging were the interviews with neighbors. The testimony of the twins' former teachers who'd noticed the decline. Clean clothes becoming threadbare. Packed lunches disappearing. 2 bright kids who'd started showing signs of stress and fear. "I asked Jordan once if everything was okay at home," a teacher told a news camera, tears streaming. "They said everything was fine. But their eyes said something else. And I didn't push. God forgive me, I didn't push." The court moved quickly. Linda's guardianship was revoked. An investigation into potential financial impropriety was launched. Greg, the husband, was found to have multiple creditors demanding payment. The house they'd lived in was mortgaged to the point of insolvency. They'd been drowning financially, and the twins had been treated as the obstacle to salvation rather than children who needed care. Linda gave one interview, trying to defend herself. "It went poorly. I did my best," she said, but even she seemed to know it was a lie. They were difficult, demanding. Their mother spoiled them with all that education nonsense, made them think they were special. The interviewer had looked at her with barely concealed disgust. That education nonsense saved a man's life. Linda had no response to that. Marcus Whitmore, meanwhile, was recovering. The poisoning had been severe. It would take months of treatment to fully reverse the damage. But he was alive. And he was thinking about the child who'd tried to save him. The child he'd mocked. The child whose desperation he'd treated as entertainment. Thinking about the security footage that showed him at his worst. Cruel and dismissive and certain of his righteousness. The footage that now had tens of millions of views. That had become shorthand for everything wrong with wealth and privilege and power. Thinking about who he'd become. When he'd started seeing people as categories instead of humans. When he'd started believing his money made him better instead of just luckier. When he was finally strong enough to leave the hospital, his first call was to Detective Martinez. "I want to meet them," he said. "The children. If they'll allow it." Why? To apologize. To thank them. I don't know. Make amends somehow. Martinez was quiet for a moment. "They don't owe you forgiveness." "I know. And this can't be a photo op. This can't be about making yourself look good." "I understand." "Then I'll ask them. But if they say no, you accept that. You don't push. You don't use your influence. You don't make this about you." "Agreed." Martinez relayed the request to the twins, who were now staying in emergency foster care with a woman named Rosa who'd worked in child services for 20 years and specialized in trauma cases. A woman who understood that healing took time and safety and patience. "He wants to what?" Jordan asked. "Apologize. Personally." The twins looked at each other, having one of those silent conversations that twins do. Finally, Jordan nodded. "But Alex comes with me. And we meet somewhere public. And if he's rude or fake, we leave. Deal." They met in a park. Neutral ground. Marcus Whitmore arrived without security, without handlers, without the armor of wealth. Just a man who'd nearly died because he hadn't listened. Jordan and Alex sat on a bench with Rosa nearby. Protective but not hovering. Marcus approached slowly, as if approaching wild animals who might bolt. In a way he was. "Thank you for seeing me," he said, and his voice was different from the recording. Quieter. Humbler. "I know you don't have to." Jordan studied him. Those sharp eyes that had seen poison where others saw perfection now saw something else. Maybe. Or the beginning of understanding. "You were really mean," Jordan said bluntly. "I was. I'm sorry. You made everyone laugh at me." "I did. And I'm sorry for that too. You didn't believe me, even when I was telling the truth." Marcus sat down on the bench opposite them, keeping distance but showing he wasn't leaving. "I didn't believe you because I looked at you and only saw what you didn't have. I saw your clothes and your situation and I decided that meant you didn't know anything worth knowing. I was completely, catastrophically wrong." "You would have died," Alex said quietly. It was the first time Alex had spoken. "If the ambulance had been any slower, if Jordan hadn't warned you at all, you would have died." "I know." "Do you?" Jordan asked. "Do you really know? Because we tried to save you and you treated us like garbage. You had us thrown out. You ate the poison just to prove we were wrong. You almost died just because you couldn't imagine that a kid like me might know more than you did." Marcus looked at the ground. "Everything you're saying is true. And I have no excuse. I can say I was conditioned by privilege, or that society taught me to dismiss certain people, or that I was having a bad day. But none of that matters. I looked at a child trying to save my life and I chose cruelty. That's on me. That's who I was. That's who I'm trying very hard not to be anymore." "Why?" Jordan pressed. "Because you almost died? Because you got caught on camera? Because your reputation is ruined? Or because you actually think you were wrong?" This was the test. Jordan had learned from their mother to look for truth beneath words. to verify, to question, to see clearly. Marcus met Jordan's eyes. All of those reasons, if I'm honest. The near-death experience. The humiliation of the footage. The knowledge that I'll be remembered for this forever. But also, he paused, choosing words carefully, also because you were a child who'd lost everything and you still tried to help me. You had every reason to let me eat that poison. To walk away. To think I deserved whatever happened. But you didn't. You tried to save someone who'd never done anything for you. Who you had no reason to care about. That kind of character? That's something I've never had. Something money can't buy. And it came from a homeless 9-year-old who I treated like trash. Silence. Then Alex spoke again. Mom used to say that everyone has knowledge. Different kinds. And the worst mistake is thinking your kind is the only kind that matters. Your mother was right, Marcus said quietly. And clearly she taught you well. You both saved my life with what she gave you. I'm alive because she loved you enough to teach you. That's a debt I can never repay. We don't want your money, Jordan said quickly. I know, but I'd like to help anyway. If you'll let me. Not to make myself feel better. Not as charity. But because he stopped, struggling. Because I need to do something. Because I can't just go back to my life pretending this didn't happen. Pretending I didn't learn something. And maybe, if I'm very lucky, you might let me be part of whatever comes next. Not as a benefactor. As someone learning from people who have something to teach. Jordan looked at Alex. Alex looked at Rosa, who nodded slightly. We'll think about it, Jordan said. But I'm not forgiving you yet. You have to earn that. I understand. And you have to actually change. Not just say nice things. Actually be different. I'm trying. Then we'll see. It wasn't absolution. But it was possibility. And sometimes that was enough to start with. Hit subscribe to see what happens when these children get the support they deserve and watch the transformation that follows. Question: do you believe people can truly change, or is Marcus Whitmore just saving face? What would real change look like to you? The transformation began with a single phone call Marcus made while still in that park, with Jordan and Alex watching. He called his lawyers, then his accountants, then his board of directors. I'm establishing a foundation, he announced. Full funding. Immediately. Focus area, homeless youth, specifically those with expertise or knowledge that's being dismissed because of their circumstances. I want programs that identify and nurture talent regardless of where it's found. I want intervention systems that listen to children. I want emergency services that respond to children's reports with the same seriousness they'd give adults. And I want it named after someone who actually lived these values. He looked at Jordan and Alex. Would it be all right if we named it after your mother? The Sarah Chin Initiative for Youth Advocacy and Protection. Jordan's eyes filled with tears. Really? Really? She deserves to be remembered. For what she taught you. For what you were able to do because of her. The world should know her name. It was Rosa who spoke next, her voice gentle but firm. That's a beautiful gesture. But these children need more than gestures. They need stability. A home. Education. Time to heal. I know, Marcus said. I'm not trying to fix everything with money. I'm trying to use what I have to make things better. If I can. Then let me tell you what would actually help, Rosa said. These children need permanent placement. They need therapy. They need advocates in the court system. They need their story told carefully, not exploited. They need protection from media vultures and people who want to use them for their own purposes. Can you help with that? Just whatever they need. No strings. And when the reporters come calling, when people want to interview them or put them on talk shows, will you use your influence to shield them until they're ready? Absolutely. Rosa studied him for a long moment, then nodded slowly. Then maybe you really are trying to change. The next months were a whirlwind of careful, deliberate transformation. The twins moved in with Rosa officially. Not foster care, full, permanent, legal adoption. A home where they were wanted, celebrated, protected. They started therapy, both together and separately, processing the loss of their mother, the betrayal by Linda, The months on the streets. The trauma of not being believed. The viral fame that had made them simultaneously invisible and overexposed. They returned to school. A good school, carefully chosen. Their teachers were briefed on their situation but not their identity. They were allowed to just be children learning, not celebrities or objects of pity. Alex discovered a love for biology. For understanding living systems. Following in their mother's footsteps but in their own way. Jordan discovered a talent for public speaking. For advocacy. For taking the hard lessons learned and turning them into policy recommendations that actually made sense. The Sarah Chin initiative launched with more funding than anyone expected. Not just Marcus's money, others joined. Other people who'd seen the footage and understood that something fundamental had been wrong. That children's voices mattered. That expertise came in unexpected packages. That society's hierarchies of whose knowledge counted were actively dangerous. The initiative established. Emergency response protocol. Any report from a minor about contamination, poison, danger, or public health concern would be investigated immediately. Not dismissed. Not mocked. Investigated. Youth Expertise Recognition Program. Identifying children with specialized knowledge from any source. Deceased parents, unique education, lived experience, and connecting them with mentors who could help them develop those skills. Homeless youth advocacy. Teams of social workers specifically trained to understand that homelessness didn't mean incompetence, that street kids often had survival skills and knowledge that needed to be respected, not dismissed. Guardian oversight reform. Stricter monitoring of guardianship arrangements, especially those involving trusts or substantial assets. More frequent home visits. More weight given to children's testimonies about their own well-being. The changes were real. Substantial. The kind of thing that usually took years of bureaucracy and political fighting. But Marcus Whitmore had learned something from nearly dying. Urgency was a gift. And he used his influence not to cut corners but to cut through excuses. Was it enough to erase what he'd done? The footage still existed. The cruelty was permanent record. But it was something. It was change. It was effort. And slowly, carefully, Jordan began to forgive him. Not completely. Not blindly. But enough to let him visit occasionally. To let him see their science fair projects. To let him be, if not family, then perhaps a very chastened friend who'd learned the hardest way possible that wisdom doesn't announce itself with wealth or credentials. Linda, meanwhile, faced her own reckoning. The investigation into the trust fund found nothing technically illegal. She'd been careful about that. But it found enough questionable decisions that her reputation was destroyed. The interviews where she dismissed her niece and nephew's worth were played and replayed. The court of public opinion was far less forgiving than the legal system. She and Greg divorced. The house was foreclosed. She moved to another state, trying to escape the infamy. But in the age of internet memory, there is no escape. She would always be the aunt who'd valued money over children. Who'd driven two brilliant kids into homelessness rather than love them. The twins didn't speak to her again. They didn't need to. She'd become irrelevant to their story. A footnote in someone else's journey of justice and healing. 2 years after that desperate scream in the Grandeur Hotel, the Sarah Chin Initiative held its first major public event. A ceremony honoring the memory of Dr. Sarah Chin and celebrating the work being done in her name. The ballroom was packed. Media, politicians, advocates, and filling the front row, homeless youth from the city who'd been helped by the programs. Kids who'd been listened to. Whose expertise had been recognized. Whose potential had been nurtured instead of dismissed. Jordan stood at the podium, 15 years old now, no longer the terrified child from the footage but someone finding their voice and power. My mother used to tell us that knowledge is protection, Jordan said, voice steady and clear. That learning to see clearly could save lives. She taught us to look past surfaces. To question. To verify. To speak up even when it was hard. When she died, my sibling and I lost everything. Our home. Our safety. Our place in the world. We ended up on the streets, and the world decided that meant we didn't know anything. That we weren't worth listening to. But my mother's teaching stayed with us. And when I saw something wrong, something dangerous, I did what she made me promise to do. I spoke up. Jordan paused, looking out at the audience. At Marcus Whitmore, sitting in the back, listening with the intensity of someone still learning. At Rosa, beaming with pride. At Alex, sitting close, always close, the other half of their shared survival. Most of you have seen the footage. You know what happened. But what you don't know is that my mother prepared us for exactly that moment. Not because she knew I'd have to save someone in a restaurant, but because she knew the world wouldn't always listen to people like us. And she wanted us to speak anyway. The Sarah Chen Initiative exists because my mother believed that every voice matters. That children have wisdom. That the homeless have expertise. That judgment based on appearance is not just cruel, it's dangerous. My parent died protecting people, teaching people, loving people. And this initiative continues that work. It listens where others ignore. It recognizes worth where others see worthlessness. It saves lives by believing that knowledge comes in every form, from every source, if we're brave enough to hear it. Jordan's voice grew stronger. To everyone who's ever been dismissed because you're too young, too poor, too different, your knowledge matters. Your truth matters. Your voice matters. Don't let anyone convince you otherwise. And to the adults listening, when a child screams, "Don't eat that food," maybe, just maybe, you should listen. Because wisdom doesn't wait for age or wealth or credentials. It shows up in bare feet and torn clothes and desperate voices. And if you miss it because you can't see past appearances, you might miss everything. The applause was thunderous. People were crying, standing, recognizing not just the story but the truth underneath it. That assumptions kill. That judgment blinds. That the most important warnings often come from the most unexpected sources. That a child's voice can save a life, if anyone bothers to listen. After the ceremony, Marcus approached the twins one more time. "Thank you," he said simply, "for giving me a chance to be better." "Are you?" Jordan asked. Still questioning. Still verifying. Still their mother's child. "I'm trying. Every day. I think I'm less terrible than I was." Alex laughed. Actually laughed. "That's progress." "Will you tell me more about your mother?" Marcus asked. "I'd like to know about her. Not just what she taught you, but who she was." The twins looked at each other. Then Jordan nodded. "She was brilliant," Alex began. "But she was also kind. She never made people feel small for not knowing things." "She worked all the time," Jordan added. "But she always made time for us. Always answered our questions. She believed in us," they said together. And in that moment, standing in a ballroom filled with people working to continue her legacy, the twins could feel her presence. Not gone. Never gone. Living on in every child who was heard instead of dismissed. In every policy that valued truth over comfort. In every life saved by someone who chose to listen. Subscribe to this channel because stories of justice and redemption matter. Because children deserve to be heard. Because the world changes when we choose to see clearly instead of comfortably. Final question. Have you ever been judged by how you looked instead of what you knew? Have you ever dismissed someone you shouldn't have? Share your story below. Let's learn together.